And welcome back to Primility Primer, your twice weekly reminder to practice keeping your pride and humility in balance so that you can better manage your emotions and make your next decision a better one. This is episode number 87, and I am your host, Jared Morris. So, thus far in 2016, we've spent a lot of time redefining the benefit of Primility and discussing some important practices that can help us achieve that benefit. The benefit, as I define at the beginning of each one of these primers, is helping you better manage your emotions so that your next decision is a better one. And the important practices that we've discussed here in the new year on a few recent episodes are gratitude and empathy, which, when done consistently, put us into a proper primility mindset. But today I want to go back to the foundation, to the most basic of basic primility tenets, the importance of practicing keeping your pride and your humility in balance. Because this is the key, and this is what it all comes back to. What makes primility work for me and for so many others is this simple binary spectrum, which shines important light on our emotions and helps remove the complexity from our decisions. So, in this primer, let's run through a couple of examples of how to actually use primility out there in our wild, unpredictable daily lives. And I'm going to base these examples on two of the four methods for increasing self-awareness that I discussed in our last episode, number 86. And if you missed that episode, I highly encourage you to listen to it. You can, of course, go one back in your feed or go to primility.com/show/086. Okay, so let's get into these examples. So let's say that you're writing in your journal, okay? That was our number one way to increase your self-awareness from that last episode. So you're writing in your journal and you come to a point where you're assessing your progress toward a goal. And in this case, your goal is to read more books in 2016. You set this modest goal of reading 24 books in 2016, 2 per month, okay? Pretty basic, pretty simple. Yet, here we sit on January 25th, 2016, and you have yet to complete one book. You're behind pace. In fact, you haven't even started the race. Now, immediately, you start to think about how busy you've been at work and how you've been trying to spend more quality time with your significant other at night and how having the in-laws over for those few days created a dearth of quiet time and yada, yada, yada. In other words, you start instinctively listing off all of these reasons and excuses in your head for why you've made no progress. This is pride talking, and it's in excess. It was your pride in the first place that led you to set this goal because you want to improve yourself and you thought you were capable of reading 2 books per month rather than a more modest 1 book per month. But again, here you sit near the end of January with no books read, and now that prideful part of you is having trouble coming to grips with your failure. So you're putting walls up and you're searching for any possible reason to excuse this behavior that you're secretly ashamed of, but that your pride won't even let you admit to yourself. Well, in this moment, you need to better manage that emotion so that you can make your next decision a better one. So first, acknowledge it. You're way on the pride side of the spectrum right now. It's okay. It's natural. That happens to all of us. The next step then is to resolve to add some humility to the situation. So think about the strong example you'll be setting for your significant other, maybe kids if you have them, who might be inspired to read when you are. Think about how much you have to learn from these bright minds who have so much knowledge to share, whose books you're planning to read. And think about the reality of a year-long goal to read 24 books and how no one is Superman and can do it all at once. It takes a regular commitment over a long period of time to do it. And frankly, you're behind on that commitment. But if you take a positive action right here, right now, you can start moving in the right direction. And there is so much that you'll be able to do with the knowledge that you gain from these books. So why not start right this minute? Now, you may notice that that last statement right there is even twinged with a bit of pride. And, here's the reality of primility, certainly as I've talked about it with other people and certainly as I've experienced it in my own life, which is that sometimes when we try to balance excess pride with humility, we can go so far in the other direction that we swing to the opposite side of the spectrum. And in this case, you then run the risk of getting so down on yourself for your lack of progress at reading these books that you don't even start, right? Meekness takes over, and that would be counterproductive. So it might take a last gasp of pride to actually get moving, but it was your intentional commitment to humility that swung your emotions into balance and helped you make that next decision a better one, a more productive one, one that moves you forward, right? And right there in that moment, you decide to use the rest of your journaling time to read. It's a first step, it's a start, and it was a much better decision than simply indulging in all of your prideful excuses as you were doing. That's one example. Let's go to another example. So in that last episode, Primility Primer 86, I talked about how being in a long-term relationship is such a great way to increase your own self-awareness. And so this example is just taken from an example from a long-term relationship, which I just made up as I was sitting here typing. So Alicia and Walter, okay, they're in a long-term relationship and they have a good relationship. But as with all relationships, there are issues that occasionally crop up. For example, Alicia will ask Walter a question, and Walter will respond in kind of a nasty tone. And it just happened, in fact. And this isn't the first time. It's happened before. And Alicia typically doesn't say anything because she feels like it might be making a mountain out of a molehill, and she'd just prefer to not start an argument. But deep inside, it bothers her. And the cumulative impact of Walter's occasional rudeness is becoming negative. Alicia's feeling disrespected and unappreciated. Plus, each time that she doesn't speak up about how she's feeling, her strength to discuss it in a productive manner with Walter dissipates. And she kind of knows that she'll eventually snap and explode, and it will create a huge issue, or she'll never say anything about it at all, and the resentment will fester to a point where it may rot their relationship. Plus, Alicia, she tries to see it from Walter's side. She knows that she's not perfect, and sometimes she might even deserve a rude tone. And Walter might not even realize how it's coming across because he really is a kind person and he does treat her well. They're just these little isolated incidents, and it's not like it's that bad anyway. So Alicia thinks, I can deal with it just to keep the peace for the betterment of the relationship. Now here, Alicia is being so humble as to be meek. Yes, she's grateful for the relationship that she has, and she's trying to be empathetic and to see it from Walter's viewpoint, and she thinks she's acting in the best interest of their relationship, and yet all she's really doing is excusing herself for making a next decision that will avoid confronting what has become a real issue in their relationship, even if it hasn't been discussed, because it bothers Alicia, and that's what matters. So Alicia needs to better manage this natural tendency to humility, which is spilling into meekness, by adding some pride to the mix. She needs to show respect to herself, the same respect that she's hoping Walter will show to her. She needs to believe that her feelings matter and that avoiding the topic is only in the short-term interest of the relationship, but not at all in the long-term interest of the relationship. If it truly does bother her, and if it does cause resentment to fester, things will only get worse the longer the situation isn't confronted. Besides, as she even admits, Walter may not even realize how his tone is coming across. And so why not bring it up in as non-confrontational a manner as possible and see how he responds? I mean, yes, Alicia runs the risk of starting an argument, especially if Walter's pride gets involved, right? And he may even realize that he's doing this, but being confronted about it triggers that natural pride reaction. He may not want to admit that he's doing it. And so there may be some layers there that have to be peeled back. And so you do run the risk of that, but that is a short-term inconvenience or moment of uncomfortability that could create a positive long-term change. And, that will in many ways depend on Walter's reaction. But remember, they have a strong relationship. And chances are Alicia coming forward with what bothers her will have an impact on Walter. And even if his initial response is overly prideful, if he can then mix some humility into that and see it from Alicia's side as she's done to him, then perhaps he will work to change the behavior because he might not even realize what he was doing or how it came across. And you can kind of see how in this case, it may be Walter's excess pride and Alicia's excess humility that aren't allowing them to find a common ground. But if just one of them will step forward, if Alicia will summon the pride to step forward and say something, or even if Walter realizes it and he'll summon the humility to come and offer an apology because he realizes that he said something in a nasty tone. Alicia hasn't said anything, but it probably bothered her. And if he comes forward, if one of them will come to the middle, it'll bring both of them to the middle. And that's where Primility, not just on an individual level, but between two people in a relationship, can be so beneficial and can help either one of them come to a next decision that is a better and more productive one for confronting and hopefully overcoming this issue. So the big idea there is, first you have the self-awareness, then you have the self-determination, right? In each of these two examples, you can see how the first step is self-awareness. And Primility is the linchpin between these two, between self-awareness and self-determination, because Primility reminds us to practice self-awareness. In a lot of ways, that's what Primility is getting into this mindset of having self-awareness and being able to step outside of our emotions a little bit and view them, right? And we're able to view our emotions for what they are and assess where they fall along this simple spectrum of pride and humility. And the next step is then self-determination, which becomes much simpler once we see where we are along this pride and humility spectrum. Where are we right now? What decision do we make next? If we're too far left of center on the pride side, then our next decision and subsequent action needs to be driven by humility to bring us back into balance. If we're too far right of center on the humility side, then our next decision and subsequent action needs to be one driven by pride, which will bring us back into the middle, bring us back into balance. And when we practice this simple thought process and formula over and over, using whatever triggers, whatever reminder triggers work for us, like I use my red wristband, it starts to become a natural part of our mindset, and our practice of Primility becomes routine. But it all starts with that first, next, better decision. So my question for you is, what next better decision will you make today? And as always, I'd love to hear about it. Comment on the episode page. Send me an email, jerod@primility.com, or join our Primility Facebook group, which you can do at primility.com/Facebook. Just request access. I will let you in, because the only way that you could hear about it or find out about it is right here on an episode of Primility Primer. Join that Facebook group, become part of the discussion, because we'd love to have you. But most importantly, we want to continue to use these primers as reminders of the benefits of Primility and how to go out there and use it in your daily life, because it doesn't do much good to listen to it here, but then not take it out and practice it in the real world. So look for an opportunity today where maybe you feel your pride welling up, or you feel yourself, not wanting to step up in a certain situation, and humility is taking over, and just make that next decision to swing it back into balance and see what happens. It's always had such a huge impact on me, had so many big benefits for me, and I know that it can for you too. All right. Well, thank you for joining me for this episode of Primility Primer. I always appreciate it. As always, stay cognizant of your pride and your humility so that you can better manage your emotions and make your next decision a better one. I'll talk to you on Thursday. Wrist bump.